Welcome back, everyone, to OpenLine. We are talking with Barbara McGinnis. She is with Takis McGinnis, and we are talking about elder care law. She's joining us by Zoom from her office there in Hendersonville. And very interesting discussion as we went to break, talking about the look back and when will TennCare come after your house to pay for the bills that you or a spouse might run up. And you had some really interesting stuff to say there, but you said you went to a seminar today talking about how to pay for long-term care. And what are some things, what did you learn?
Yeah, so today actually the firm, there's 4 of us, and we did this town hall style webinar where we were the presenters. And,
oh, okay, yeah.
We had a moderator, and the participants, the webinar attendees, were able to ask questions about pre-planning. So a lot of people do know that long-term care is very expensive, and even if they have an idea about what we sort of talk about the buckets of money that you can use to pay for long-term care, private wealth, why you would want to if you're able to, public money, and then maybe the long-term care insurance. There was lots of questions about long-term care insurance and how to use it and why you should get it or why you shouldn't get it, and different thoughts on that. But a lot of the interesting conversation, I thought, revolved around preparing. When do you start planning? How do you start protecting yourself? How old should you be, or how, if it's not an age thing, because we know there's 80-year-olds that are still out mowing their grass and taking care of everything and being, they're not anywhere near thinking about chronic care. And there's 60-year-olds that are. So it's not always an age thing. It's a health and function thing. So that's kind of where we start with a prospective client in terms of planning. How functional are you? Do we have time to put in place a 5-year or longer plan for you? How do you get on that elder care continuum? Maybe you age in, but maybe there's an event that puts you on that care continuum, like a stroke or a fall with, you fall off the ladder and break your hip, and you weren't planning on that happening to you, but now suddenly you're having complications from that. So some of those things can happen quite suddenly that will interrupt a 5-year plan. Sometimes we're just, we do the best we can with that planning ahead. We can set ourselves up for planning because we know certain medical conditions and cognitive conditions like dementia follow an relatively orderly trajectory, so that we know what to anticipate in terms of average duration of an illness, with the usual progression. Most dementias take, if they're, depending on when they're diagnosed, you may have as many as 8 to 10 years before you're looking at institutionalization, if it follows a fairly normal course. Some people go through those phases a lot more quickly, of course. I don't want to make it sound like there's a cookie cutter approach. We do believe that every family and every person's unique, but by just understanding the healthcare system, how things get paid for, understanding some of the basics about certain illnesses, chronic heart disease, Parkinson's disease, some of the things that can really impair someone's functional condition, allows you to pre-plan. If you start early enough, you really should consider long-term care insurance. I know a lot of people kind of say negative things about it, like the premiums go up and up, but for the most part, you're paying relatively small premiums for a larger benefit at the end of the day, when you are looking at $250 to $300 a day for a nursing home bed. And if you're in your 50s or early 60s, you may be paying a few $1,000s a year for a premium. That does go up as you age, because you become more likely to use the benefit. Once you start using the benefit, your premiums stop. So planning ahead allows you to consider things like long-term care insurance, or the use of, we use trusts, T-R-U-S-T.
Oh, yeah,
a trust.
Yeah, now we can talk about trusts all day, but yeah.
Yeah, I love talking about trusts. We can talk about trusts to hold assets, and this is why Tim and I and Chris, we are not big fans of giving the house away to your children, but we use the vehicle of a trust to do that. You can gift the house to a trust. Yes, it's subject to the 5-year look back. That's why we talk about it as being pre-planning. And the beneficiaries of that trust are your intended heirs. So if that's your children, that's fine. The beneficiary of the trust would be those intended heirs. But it is an incomplete gift, and there is protections from creditors. Now, not a fan of, if you have lots of creditors, we're not going to put your house in the trust so you can avoid paying those creditors. We're talking about anticipated future health care concerns like long-term care expenses.
Right.
That we want to protect that asset over the life of both spouses. And then when both spouses have passed, then the house would transfer on without probate to those intended heirs, most likely your children.
So you're talking about all kinds of different strategies, really, for paying for long-term care. And so, all right, when people come in, who are your primary clients? Is it usually is it often someone who has an aging parent, or is it the aging couple themselves? Like, how often do you get someone coming in, I have an aging parent and I would like some help?
Well, the client is actually always going to be the older person. So the client would always be the mom, the dad, the grandma, the grandpa, the person that is in need of care. So we're always very clear that our clients are the older adult. We may be working with their legal authority, their power of attorney person, may be the one that and even initiates the meeting, perhaps, that says, I really want help planning for mom and dad. And then we meet mom and dad and talk with them about planning ideas and how we can help.
Yeah, and so do you often see that a younger person comes in and says, how can you help me deal with my aging parent? Is that something you see a lot?
We do. We see that a good bit. It's probably at least a third of the time. It's a child worried about how their parents are going to manage through that long-term care, what we call the elder care journey.
And I'm sure you see a lot of Alzheimer's. And what about Parkinson's? You mentioned Parkinson's. What if there's an 80-year-old with Parkinson's? I mean, what about that issue? There's a lot of Parkinson's out there.
There is a lot of Parkinson's out there, and someone I met with this week is dealing with a spouse with Parkinson's, and there is that. Again, that's a fairly known trajectory. We sort of know what to expect as Parkinson's develops. We can always hope for improved treatment, and there is a lot of good stuff going on with Parkinson's, but the anticipation that their condition will decline over time and that they will become more dependent in their activities of daily living and need assistance. Do they want to bring care in at home and keep that person at home as long as possible? And as long as possible looks different to different families. It's always important to ask them, what does it mean to you? For some folks, it's, well, as long as they can take themselves to the bathroom. That might be a real indicator for some family, a strong point there. Or as long as they know who I am. Sorry, hold on, I gotta turn my lights on.
That happens to me all the time in my office. It won't happen here in my studio, though it looks like it just did.
It did. Something went out behind you.
Okay, it's time to your office there.
Yeah, but kind of lost my train of thought. Sorry about that.
You were talking about Parkinson's, the natural trajectory.
Parkinson's, the natural progression, things that may cause someone to need to be placed. Severe immobility, which could happen with a Parkinson's patient. And, you know, if it's the husband impacted by the disease, maybe the wife cannot physically manage the mobility needs. There's all kinds of reasons that becomes that as long as possible point for a family that they would need placement. They're married. We go into that whole married transition. Do we transfer the house to the well spouse? And what do we do start inventorying the money and figuring out what's the best way to pay for care and what's the best care to get? Is it going to be at home, or are we talking about moving into facility-based care?
Right. Those are the kind of things you got to think about. All right. All right. We are going to take a break, and I think we're going to reset the OpenLine logo behind me. I think it went out when your light went out there in your office. It just went out. All right. We'll take a break. We'll be back right after this.